You're listening
to In the Box,
the brand new podcast from the FA for grassroots football.
Hello and welcome to In the Box Extra Time. Extra Time is an episode where we take a deeper dive into the content to help support your club or league be the best you possibly can. This is a brand new resource brought to you by the Football Association. For those that don't know me, my name's Tom Lee and I'm National Club Services Manager at the Football Association. And for each one of these episodes, I'm of course joined by my co-host, FA Club Consultant, Marketing Whiz, Grassroots Volunteer, quite a legend in her own right, Charlotte Richardson.
Thank you, John. That's such a lovely introduction there. And welcome as well for those of you joining us for yet another episode of In the Box Extra Time. It's our series of webinars to help equip you with further expertise and guidance from the grassroots game. And you're tuned into an episode where we're going to be exploring CASC and its ability to support fundraising and gift aid. If it's your first time listening, I'd really encourage you to head to the FA's Grassroots Hub on YouTube, where you can find a whole host of resources about funding, marketing, volunteering. There's so much on there to go and discover, as well as, of course, Tom, our In the Box podcast, the FA's podcast, again, to supply more support to the grassroots football community in these times.
Absolutely right, Charlotte. So please go check that out. We welcome back this evening Bob Stretton and Brian Crinigan. They was our go-to experts during our mini-series around funding. So that those episodes are on the resource hub that Charlotte's just mentioned there. And tonight we will also be joined by Dr. Robert Bradshaw, who is a true expert in the area of CASC and gift aid.
This is In the Box.
Brian, starting with you, can you kick us off this evening and telling us a little bit about yourself and a bit of your background?
Yeah, thanks, Tom. Good evening, everybody. My name is Brian Crinigan. I've been involved in grassroots football for 26 years. Rugby Borough Football Club now. Start as anybody, got asked to run the line, and it all sort of developed from there, from managing to coaching to setting up a club, and developed the club over the years. We've secured grants from the Football Foundation and various other organisations to do a 35-acre site. We have a lease on the site for 125 years. We've just 5 years ago we installed a 3G pitch. This year we're installing another 3G pitch because of the growth of the club, 67 teams, and with some community use as well. We have a full male and female pathway with disability growing, with some good growth for the following for next season, and in addition to that is five senior teams. So we've branched out to our seniors and provided more teams for our youngsters coming through. We've secured over £2.5 million in grants, secured for the club and for the facility. And I currently work as on a part-time basis, doing some work with the FA on helping other clubs secure some funding and advice around structures and stuff like that. And part of me is to talk tonight about CACS. Our club's been a CACS for about 10 years. We've benefited from it immensely with volunteers' expenses and claiming gift aid on part subscriptions. And over the last year, we've claimed £37,000 in gift aid, and that's helped to provide match funding for our 3G. That's me done.
Well, that's so impressive, Brian. And I know we're going to delve into your experience a little bit more throughout this webinar. And also we're delighted to be joined by Bob Stretton once again. And Bob, you've been involved in football for a long time as well. And I know that you have worked with CASC and gift aid. It's not something that would have escaped your experience, I'm sure. What are the top 3 things those listening can expect to hear about from your experiences across the grassroots game?
Well, I started with CASC in about 2012 or something like that. But this has been in being since 2001. And I helped out at a scout group as well, and they were massive into claiming gift aid. Every scout group in the country virtually was claiming gift aid, and I couldn't understand why football clubs did it. So I got involved with it. And once I was a registered charity, so I already had the opportunity of claiming gift aid through that. But then we started to work with CASC, and you'll hear from Robert later on about a process we ran with De Montfort University, where Robert worked. And we developed a system of getting CASCs orchestrated. And the massive advantage that we found out straight away was, the first thing you're entitled, if you've got your own ground, you get 80% rate relief. Now, since we've been a CASC, we've actually claimed rate relief on £119,000 through the gift aid. But also, there's the opportunity of claiming on, and I use the term loosely, donations, because HMRC have a different view to me on donations. But we've done it right. We've had an audit, and to date, since 2012, we've claimed £160,000. So they're three of the main advantages. But Brian will tell you also another advantage is, if you're a CASC, that little bottle that you get on your bar or you go round now and again collecting money on, is called a GADS, which is a gift aid small donation scheme. And if you get little donations like that, anything, and Robert might correct me, I think it's anything under £30 now, Robert, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
So if somebody gives you a £20 note and says, stick it in the club funds, you can then claim 25% of that back as gift aid. And the beauty about it is there is no documentation involved with actually claiming gift aid small donations. So it's a win-win situation, but we'll come on to that and how I've managed to get the money a bit later on. Thank you.
Thanks, Bob. Extra time, again, all about those top tips, things you might not even realise that are included in becoming a CASC, and the benefits around fundraising and gift aid. As I said earlier, and you've already heard from him there in responding to Bob, we've got Dr. Robert Bradshaw with us this evening. Dr. Robert Bradshaw is an expert in this area and he's helped the FA over a number of years. And as Robert says it himself, gift aid is one of the most underused opportunities for clubs, hence why you're all tuned in and listening. But before we get started, Robert, can you give us a little bit of a background to yourself and some of the things we might expect to cover on this episode of In the Box?
Yeah, sure thing, Tom and Charlotte. I got introduced to gift aid about 8 years ago, and like Bob said, he sort of wandered into university and he was looking for support to sort of work with football clubs to try and develop sort of financial strength and get more money into them and develop them. And we used groups of students at the time, which we were training up and taking to do work in football clubs. And since then, I sort of finished at the university and set up the company specifically around fundraising and gift aid to help mainly football clubs, mainly sports clubs, but also charities as well. And through this, I've been involved with, you know, a range of clubs from different sports, and from setting them up as either a CASC, Community Amateur Sports Club, or as a charity, and then sort of looking at how they sort of develop all the different gift aid tools in the organisation, and then how they submit claims to HMRC, and also, I suppose, on the but how they build it year on year. Because, you know, one of the things about gift aid is it needs to be across as much of the organisation as possible. And if you've got a few people doing it, it's a lot of effort for a few people. You get it across the organisation and all those little bits add up. And so, so working on these projects, and also there's been several HMRC reviews which I've been involved with. And that's been great for getting an insight into, you know, as Bob said, how HMRC interpret the gift aid rules. And when they set out the rules, and they're quite complex when they set them out, but then it's how they actually interpret it. And that really is a minefield. And, you know, HMRC could have done more to sort of clarify a lot of these points. It's been one of the things which has kept some clubs hesitant, but having that insight is hopefully some of the things we'll talk about this evening. That's
fantastic, Robert. And for anyone that's tuned in, I think we're about 10 minutes in and I've already taken away so much from this this In the Box Extra Time webinar. And like I say, for those of you that have just joined in, the focus of this episode is all around CASC and how that can help your club in terms of funding and gift aid.
If you're ready to be built to last,
this is the podcast for you.
Robert, for those that are listening, can you just break down exactly what is a CASC?
Yep, sure. CASC stands for Community Amateur Sports Club, and it was designed to help give sports clubs a improved status in some ways, but also a means by which they could set themselves up to get financial benefits, including gift aid within that. And so once you are set up as a CASC, and again, it's a great way to structure the club to get these benefits. Being charitable is a great way to structure the club to get these benefits. And so the club needs to look at their situation, and a CASC is preferred, or was preferred, by lots of organisations because it's just so straightforward. Setting it up, applying online, getting the CASC status. You need to have certain things in place. Be open to the whole community. Be managed by fit and proper people, not be paying your players more than £10,000 a year. So there are certain hoops, conditions you have to abide by. But once it's there forever. You don't have to do anything about gift aid, say. It doesn't matter. You can come back to it a few years on and backdate your gift aid claim. And so it's a great way to structure your club and to get benefits from things like gift aid, which you couldn't get if you weren't a CASC or a charity.
Great start. Thanks, Robert. Bob, Brian, please do contribute from your experience. So a few follow-up questions around that is, does a club need to be of a certain size, and what sort of structure do they need to have in place to obviously go down the route of becoming a CASC?
I'll take that one if you like.
Okay.
No, there's no limitation on the size. There are some restrictions, like Robert says. If you run a professional or semi-professional and you pay wages, you can't become then. But 2 teams, 3 teams, you've got to have the number of teams really to claim the benefit. But yeah, there's no problem at all. And you can be any sort. You can be unincorporated. You can be well, obviously, if you register charity, you don't need to do it. But you can be a company limited by guarantee, register for a CASC, and there isn't a problem. And it's so easy. I'll just show this data protection out of the window here. That's my folder for last year, and that's the work I did. And in there, that's £11,000 worth of claim. So it's a bit heavy on some of the information that you have to keep, and you have to keep that for 4 years. But I'll fill a few forms in for £11,000.
Yeah, just following up there from Bob. I mean, obviously, when you do your accounts at the end of the year, there has to be a donation section. So your income has to be donations, and that's from part subscriptions. I mean, Robert might help me out on this a little bit. So in effect, half of those subscriptions need to run the club. So you don't take anything back from the other donate, and then the other half can be a donation. So let's say your subs are £100 of the year. If you say, I need £60 of that to run the football club and to look after referees, pitches, etc., you can then use the other £40 as a donation in from a parent, providing they provide a gift aid form, which the club would issue to them. Robert, would you say that was?
Yeah, I would. There needs to be the liquidity in the club. So HMRC tend to look at your previous accounts, and if you say you ran your club and it costs £20,000 to run your club in the previous year, and then this year you're saying that half the money is going to be a donation, HMRC will say, well, how are you going to, if those people didn't make that donation, how are you going to run your club? And so you need to show that there's the liquidity in your club. If you're saying we've got £10,000 in the bank, and so we don't need to charge the same amount of subs we charged last year because we've got half that money to cover that, well, then they'll be happy with that should they ever review or inspect you. And it's just a case of showing, yes, we are able to do it this way. But that's a great way to claim gift aid.
Yeah. I think going on to some of the other stuff that we can do around gift aid and claiming gift aid is sponsored runs and walks and sponsored events. So if a club wants to raise some money for, say, match funding to help fund some other facilities within their grounds, and they run a sponsored walk and all 500 members take part and they raise, say, £10 each, so long as they tick the gift aid form box, the club can actually claim for a 25% refund on that amount. So if it's £10,000, 25 pence in every pound gives you, can't do me maths, but it's quite a lot of money. So that's definitely worth considering. Your sponsored events, sponsored penalty shootouts, anything. Bob, what do you think?
There's lots of things you can do. A sponsored event is a no-nonsense way of claiming gift aid, because the form is issued by HMRC. It's recognised as a lawful document, and if you've got that you've raised, say for instance, £1,000 on a sponsored event prior to the season started or just before the season started, and you want to offset against your subscriptions, that is perfectly acceptable. And when HMRC, if they ever do come and give you an audit, the only form they will want to see will be that gift aid form. And providing that's all in your resources, you've got no problem. So you could actually raise half your subscriptions on a sponsored event before you start the season, and that could all be gift aidable. And the issue of subscriptions doesn't come into it.
It's a great tool. I mean, it is a great way to get money through the sponsored events for gift aid. And just going back to your question, Tom, I think where the club is in terms of size and how they're operating may drive them to think, how should we be setting up? You know, if it's two guys that are playing football on the park with a few kids, they may say, you know, it's too much for us to be a charity. You know, I don't know if we need to be a CASC. We can stay unincorporated, we just stay as a club. As the club starts to get the ground, say, it's got more assets, it's got more responsibilities, it's got rates to pay, it may say, okay, then if we're a CASC, we can reduce our rates in some ways. As they get more members, maybe they think about protecting their staff. And Bob mentioned earlier on, you don't have to be incorporated like a limited company to be a CASC, you know, so but you may decide you want to be. And so it depends on where the club is in terms of size, in terms of looking for grant funding, in terms of number of players, in terms of risk, as to what's the best structure for them to have.
It's just worthwhile saying, whilst we're on the call, that the FA does not have a stance on how a club needs to be structured or whether they need to be incorporated, unincorporated, a CASC, a charity. Like Robert said there, it is up to each individual club circumstance for them to determine what they want to be, independent if the size of the club, whether they have assets, whether they lease or own a facility, all that needs to be taken into consideration. And there is a resource on the fa.com. If you go to the fa.com/clubs and leagues, there's our latest club structures booklet that will give you all the guidance you need in understanding which club structure you want to go down. We've had people on our most recent webinars that have actually gone through these sort of processes and become limited by guarantee organisations, and also gone down the route of CASC. So I'm just going to bring a few questions in if we can. So there's one from Leon, and Leon's saying that they're registered as a charity, not necessarily a CASC, and because they're already a charity, that CASC isn't a route they're going to go down. But am I correct in understanding that they'd still be eligible for the likes of gift aid, and how would that work for a charity organisation?
As a charity, they can get everything which a CASC can get, and they are entitled to look at other ways of gaining money as well. And so as a charity, you can also look at your membership subscriptions, and it may be that some of your membership subscriptions you can claim gift aid on as well. Whereas as a CASC, you can't claim money on your membership subscriptions. And so yes, for her, they're in a great position.
Superb.
I'd also, Tom, can I just come in? I'll also say that as a charity, there's obviously other funding avenues open to the charity side of it, more than what a CASC is. So yeah, there's more opportunities regarding becoming a charity.
And even for grant funding, people tend to, you know, charities go to the top of the tree in some ways, and you know, most of the grants and funding they get access to. Sometimes CASCs will get access to all those, but not necessarily all the time. And so CASC is a great way to structure your club. Charities a fantastic way as well. It really is.
Yeah, just going back, Bob, on what you said about the HMRC and what HMRC look for when they actually, if they come and visit you. So everybody's frightened of the words or the letters HMRC. and everybody, whoa, God, blimey, HMRC. You know, I've known clubs that have had HMRC visits, and what they basically do is they just ask for 10 gift aid forms, as Bob said, and providing you've got them 10 gift aid forms and you've done your paperwork right and everything, they'll go away very happy. I've known clubs that haven't provided the forms, and then they obviously look in deeper. But as long as you've got your paperwork, and it's very, very important, your accounts and your paperwork all match up, you'll be absolutely fine.
All the information's on the HMRC website. It's very helpful. All you've got to make sure is that you stick to the rules. And like I say, I've been claiming this now for 9 or 10 years, and I've never really had a problem. So, and certainly one of the ways we do raise a lot of money is on sponsored events. And if I help clubs out in relation to raising money for gift aid, I would always recommend that they do it through a sponsored event, because it ends on the night, because the kids bring the form in, they take the money in, and all you do then is fill a very, very short form in and send it off to HMRC, and it's usually paid to you in your bank account in 7 days.
Really, really insightful stuff so far already on this webinar, and I can see plenty of questions popping up in the chat function. Do please send them through to us, and hopefully we can address them as the webinar goes on. But Robert, I wanted to ask you quickly, you mentioned about CASC and the benefit of gift aid. I'm really conscious that we probably have people at different stages of their journey for their club. But in terms of the absolute basics, you said it's a really untapped, perhaps underutilized resource for clubs. Can you just tell us a little bit about gift aid and the benefits it can give people at the very start?
Okay, I suppose the best way is to break it down by the different ways which a club can get gift aid income into their club. And, you know, if you are, like we say, a charity, you can look at your membership payment first of all, which CASC can't. And if you've got, 300 members in the club, you can look at what they are paying, and there's a potential to claim some of this money back. It's one of the start ambiguous areas in some ways, because you can't claim gift aid on something which you are getting a benefit for. And so gift aid is meant to be based on a gift. And so if they are looking at your membership subscriptions and they are saying, you know, they get training, they get access to the facilities, they'll say that a large part of the membership subscriptions are for something they're getting something for it. But then there's an element of your membership subscriptions where it doesn't cover training, doesn't cover the facilities, and that element they are unquestioning about you claiming gift aid on that element. The trouble is that often with clubs, they don't break down in their accounting system which parts are for training or which parts are for sort of general administration costs. And so, and there's no reason why they should have. You know, there's no need for them when they're structuring their clubs to do that. They're just structuring their clubs to run a football club, not to think about gift aid and HMRC. And so you need to think about, okay, then our membership, if we are a charity, can we look at our members for payments? We need to think about, as Brian and Bob have said, about sponsorship events and doing, you know, making sure we've got those sponsorship events going each year. We could look at our volunteers, and a way which HMRC have set out, which you can use your volunteers, is to say that you can't pay your volunteers, but you can pay them expenses. And if your volunteers were to, once they got that money, that's their money. If they were to donate that back to the club, well, then that's a donation into the club, which you can claim gift aid on. Then there's private donations which other people may make. And as Bob said, if a payment is less than £30, you don't need to get a declaration form. Like Brian said, if it's to be counted as gift aid, the people have to sign a declaration form. If it's less than 30, you can just collect in this money up to £8,000 and you can claim gift aid on it. And so it's looking at the club and saying, which are the best tools to use for the club? It maybe they've only got a few members, but they've got lots of volunteers, or they've got lots of members. It depends on how they're set up. But you need to go through and work on it and work out how you then build this. Because in year one, you may get a few people involved. You need to just build that year on year, and the amounts will build year on year.
Like you said, Charlotte, I think we've covered so much already that I'm just going to try and stop us there and do a brief recap of what we've covered already. So being a CASC or a charity, there's definitely benefits to gift aid and being able to claim on gift aid, regardless of how you're set up or structured as a club. We mentioned that we've got the guide on the FA.com that people that can go and look at. And again, reiterating that the FA does not have a stance on how you should be structured, whether you're incorporated, unincorporated, but there's the different structures available for clubs to take depending on what your assets are, the size of your club, which is for you as an organisation to make a decision on. We've obviously got the different things that do benefit from being a CASC. So there's the 80% rate relief that we'd spoke about. There's obviously ways that you can structure your memberships to be able to have elements that are eligible for gift aid. And that's all to do with how you're set up in terms of your accounting. So I think we'll pull out some of them top tips a little bit further on the webinar. So the practical examples. And there's one that's come into the chat here as well that I think is a practical one that we can potentially answer. So when doing a sponsored event, is it acceptable just to add a tick box on the sponsor form? So as long as they've got that address and that tick box is ticked as a CASC organisation, that you could claim that back?
Yes.
Very simple. Yeah, I thought as much, but I wanted to bring it to the floor. So that answers that one for you, Kev.
If you go onto the HMRC website, they produce all the forms for you, and yes, all that the person that's sponsoring for ticks the box to say that he's a taxpayer. Now, what Brian alluded to is what will happen is when the if ever the HMRC come and do an audit of you, they'll take out the sponsor form and they will check. They can check because obviously the name and address and everything else. I mean, if they've ticked the box, then they've ticked the box. But I think the comeback is then on them. So if they spotted you for 100 quid and we've claimed £25 on it, they'll go after the donor for £25. So, but the main thing is don't tick the boxes yourself.
So we're talking about any sort of sponsored event is gift aidable again. So a backpack within a local supermarket, can you claim gift aid on that?
Yes.
Yes, because that comes under GADs. So what happens is the people are donating X amount of money, they throw it in the bucket, you pick the bucket up, you take it away. Yes, you can claim gift aid.
Brilliant.
Robert?
Yeah, no, that's good. Yeah, quite right.
Brilliant. And one more that I want to bring to the floor before I kick it on to you, Charlotte, to move us on a little bit. And also just to remind people, all these links, once this webinar is available on the resource hub, when we're talking about where to go and look on HMRC, where to go, and obviously we're going to navigate you towards Robert's website as well, where there's support and expertise there, will all be within the show notes. But one of the questions from Andrew Lee is, we've heard about the pros in becoming a CASC. What are the negative or cautionary aspects of going down this CASC route? They're an FA Charter Standard club, not a charity, or currently a CASC, have 15 youth teams from under 6 through to under 18s, don't own their own ground, but pay an annual fee to a 3-pitch owner, and also pay for training venues. So I think the main bulk within that one is there anything to be cautious of around becoming a CASC or a charity for them, considering the size of the organisation?
I don't think it's a case of being cautious. I think it's because the beautiful thing about being a CASC is you don't have to do anything immediately. You know, it's there for you. You know, you may not claim gift aid for 2 or 3 years, but you can still backdate the gift aid in 2 or 3 years when you are ready to collect that money. There is the worry that, you know, when you try to backdate claims, sometimes the declaration forms, for example, you need to get people to sign, and people have moved on from the club, and they're not always available, and so it's harder to backdate claims. In their club, it's more a case of thinking not in some ways about whether I should just be a CASC or charity for the financial benefits, but also about, should I become incorporated or not? You know, should I be setting up as a limited company? How do I, you know, structure myself? And that sort of situation, sort of wider discussion around, you know, how, you know, if anything was to happen, if someone was to get into an accident on a pitch and it was seen that they were being liable in some way, the first aid person wasn't there, do they need to start to think about protecting the people that are running the club? And so there's a wider discussion to be had with them, you know, in terms of how, you know, how they cover themselves and protect themselves, as well as how they look to build the club and put themselves into the strongest position to bring in finance into the club and to apply for future funding. And so there's a wider discussion to be had even for them, yes.
This is In the Box.
So many fantastic questions, so much great information. We've had a comment from Kev in the chat. Thanks for the answers. This is blowing my mind. Well, you and me both. I'm making plenty of notes, and I'm sure lots of people tuned in will watch this back on YouTube and catch up with it as well. So much great information. And just to, again, break it down to some really basic questions that most people will probably consider at the start of their journey. 2 questions that I'd like to ask you first, Robert, and then guys, if you want to chip in and share some of your expertise as well, that would be great. 1, what is the process to becoming a CASC? And 2, when is the right time to do it?
Yeah, I would say that the right time is as soon as possible, because you can always, backdate. And so I would want people, the club viable, to become a CASC as soon as possible, and to start correcting the paperwork, to get the financial situation in place, to get the audit trail in place. And so if they need to go back in years to come, they've got everything there. The process is very similar. For a CASC, it's an online process. You go through the government gateway. You have various questions. You have to send in some information. Your last year's accounts. That you have various bits which they ask you for. Identify responsible people. It's not onerous. It really isn't onerous. And most of the time, if you work for an organisation, you probably spend about a month getting the paperwork together. Send it off to HMRC. Within 3 months, they should come back to you and tell you you've got your status. Becoming a charity, is a bit more onerous, especially if you go down the CIO route, because you are becoming a charity. You're also registering with Companies House and becoming incorporated, and so that's a bit more onerous. And you have to, the Charity Commission ask for a bit more detail, and getting your constitution sorted out is a bit more complex. But it still can be done within, including their time to look over it, within 3 months, rarely 4 months. And so both of them are a lot more straightforward than you think they're going to be. But that's just a start of the process. Once you are a charity or CASC, it's then structuring and getting all the declaration forms signed and get everything organised in your club, which needs to be done as well.
Yeah, Robert, just going on that, there probably the constitution would probably club's constitution probably have to change, and one of the major changes is the bit at the end where if the CASC disbands or something like that, they have to give the proceeds to another CASC, is that right, or another charity?
It is, exactly. And so, I mean, what's the stuff they ask for? And so, like you say, if you're paying more than £10,000, you can't be a CASC. If you're charging too much for people to play the sport, I think it's £1,612. They'll have issues with you. If it costs too much to do the sport, if people have to pay when they join, say, over £500 in kit, they'll have issues with you becoming, not saying you can't, but you have to find ways to say how you are supporting people on lower incomes. And so there's various bits of information they will be asking you for, but they give out guide constitutions. If you adopt one of the charity commission's constitutions and more or less use that, it comes back to you in a few weeks' time. If you use your own, it's probably going to take at least 3 months. And so they do give you guides, and if you follow those guides, they're very good. If you want to deviate from these, it may take a bit longer, but hopefully most of the information, most of the clubs can get that information relatively painlessly. It shouldn't be that bad to get the information together.
Yeah, just going back a few steps. I mean, and talking about sponsored events and everything like that. If a company comes to you and says, "Okay, I want to sponsor one of your teams, and I want my name on the front of the shirt, so I'm going to give you £500." You can't claim gift aid on that because they're actually getting a benefit from it. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. It needs to be a personal donation. The idea about gift aid is that what the government is saying is that when somebody worked, they got taxed. And so the idea of gift aid is that individuals can say, I want to support this organisation, this charity, or this CASC. And if the person signs a declaration form and they go into their charity or CASC and they say, here's £100, you can then claim back the tax which they had paid, the basic tax. So the government will give you, on top of that £100, an additional £25 into your bank account. But if it's a company, then they haven't paid, it's a different situation. So it needs to be a personal payment made by individuals who are taxpayers in the UK, who have paid more tax in that year, and so they can claim it back. But a bit like Bob said, if they find out the individual hasn't paid enough tax in a year, it's the individual they will go to for the extra bit, not the charity or the CASC.
I think the best way to describe it, and I describe it to a lot of clubs, is a CASC is a poor man's charity. It gets a lot of the benefit, but not all the benefit. But you don't do half the work, and you get the same advantages. For instance, on the rate relief, a CASC will get 80% statutory rate relief, whereas a charity can get an extra 20% discretionary rate relief. So there's these small things, but if you're going to start with the basics, and CASC is a basic. So if you're not a charity already, and you want to start getting involved with CASC and gift aid, then this is an easy way to do it. And like Robert said, when you've done it for 3 or 4 years and you feel comfortable, then you can expand.
And I think that's a great point there, Bob. And correct my understanding if it's wrong, but if you start on the journey of being a CASC, and you've been a CASC for 3 or 4 years, there's no stopping them becoming a charity. It's just a case of liquidating that CASC, isn't it, and then setting back up as a charity. Is that correct?
Yes.
It is. It's just a pain sometimes, because technically you can't be a CASC and a charity, and so you could give away your CASC status, and there's no guarantee you're going to become a charity. And so it's a difficult balance. You tend to try to put in a pre-application to see if you're going to be. It's a difficult balance. The other thing is that when you set up a new legal entity, if you could have claimed back, say, 4 years worth of gift aid on your members, which you haven't done, and you suddenly set up a new legal entity, you become a charity, or even if you become incorporated, a limited company, then that's a new entity. And so that 4 years worth of gift aid claims you could have got, you can't get anymore. So before you change your entity, it's worth just having a discussion to see that we can maximize the past gift aid claims you could have got before you move on to something else.
And I think it's worthwhile mentioning as well for anyone that this is blowing their mind, like the comments that we've had from Leon there, that there is expertise out there and you can actually go and get the support you need. Yes, you potentially will need to pay for these expertise, but you've got Dr. Robert Bradshaw, which we'll give the links to Dr. Robert Bradshaw's website and stuff. It will be in the show notes. We also have our legal partners, Muckle LLP, of which you can go and have a conversation with. So don't feel you're on your own in this journey. And of course, we've got webinars such as this, which are going to continue. And we also have the FA inbox, which is clubsprogram@thefa.com. If you do have any questions around this and we need to put on future webinars to help support you, then do contact us within there, because our intentions are to try and help you be the best you possibly can be. And the advantages to being a CASC or a charity is something that is really underutilized, as we said right at the beginning.
If you go onto the HMRC website, you can actually search the register of CASCs, and it may well be as a football club down the road that does it, that you can go and knock on the door and see how they do it.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's another really good bit of advice there. And the whole purpose of this is opening up the grassroots football community so that we can share experiences and so on. So I would, like Tom just mentioned there, get in contact on that email address if there's anything specific, and do go back to that FA Resource Hub on YouTube, because there's backdated webinars where we go into even more detail. I think there's been so much information in these 40 minutes alone, so much to kind of take away and digest for people tuned in and listening back. And on In the Box, we're all about kind of those little tips, I suppose. And I'd like to ask each of you to perhaps just share your top tip. Robert, I will come to you first, and then Brian and Bob.
I would probably, one you said earlier on, Charlotte, is I probably would say don't wait. Don't put it off. Even if you have to, come to other organisations, ask us how we can support you in setting it up. I would get it set up as soon as possible and find out what paperwork you need to get in place. So even if you don't for the next 2 or 3 years claim gift aid, it's always there. And even like Bob said, when you set up as a CASC or charity, the fact you get, say, 80% rate relief guaranteed, it's just worth it from the start. There's enough gift aid tools out there. Forget about gift aid, enough advantages from being a CASC or charity. It's worth doing it early.
Sorry. All I was going to say as well, Robert, is, you know, as we're waiting for that return into grassroots football and looking ahead to future seasons, now is a good opportunity, isn't it, to soak up that information and get prepared for the future.
Definitely. Have a discussion, because gift aid's great when you set it up right. There's sometimes, I think lots of clubs have sort of, you know, looked at a club and, you know, they could be 99% the same. They could be 1% different. And that may mean that the first club could do several things which the second one can't. And so use those clubs as indications of what you can do, what can be achieved, but just check that those gift aid tools you are applying for, you can apply for them. Because with gift aid, we could go into a club, or a club could send off their gift aid application. It's all self-administered. You fill out your schedule, you send it off, and then within 2 weeks, you may have the money in your bank account. And you can carry on doing this for the next 2 to 3 years, happily spending the money. Then one day HMRC knock on your door and say, just a minute, can you explain to us how you got to that stage? And so it's just worth just, you know, having a check, you know, just, you know, a phone call, an email, just say, this is what we're doing. Are we right in this approach? Just to be sure if what you're doing is okay. And it's just prepare well, you know, plan it, think about the different gift aid tools, get people in the club. You know, the wider it is across the club, the better it is for the club, and it just works and builds year on year.
Brilliant, thank you, Robert. And before I ask Brian and Bob for their tips, of course, do drop any questions you have in the Q&A section, and hopefully we'll have a little bit of time to answer as many of them as we can. And Brian, what would your one kind of clear starter tip be?
I'm going to tell you all a story now.
We love a story.
I was going to say story time with Brian.
So back in January 2020, we decided to run a scheme with the volunteers, so claiming volunteers' expenses and gift aid. And we all sat together before the lockdown, and we went through all the coaches saying, this is what we're going to do, and this is why we're going to do it, to keep subscriptions low, to keep training costs low, to help develop facilities, to provide additional football stuff, provide match funding for our 3G. And basically, how we were going to do that was ask volunteers if they would donate their expenses back to the football club. And how that works is that a volunteer attends the club twice a week. He uses his mileage there and back. So from his postcode to the club postcode, there and back, it's calculated at 45 pence a mile throughout the season. And then there's a total there. On top of that, there's also administration expenses, which I now believe is it £24, Robert? I don't know whether you can, is it just gone up to 20?
It is. You can do more if you can justify more, but you know, that's a sort of standard guide they give.
Yeah, so I think we done £20 when it was £20. So for every month of the season, the volunteer had £20. And in total, over that, the average one that came to was £500. Now, it's great paying a volunteer £500. Thanks for your time, £500. But do you know what? We'd like you to donate that back, and then we can claim gift aid on it. And then that gift aid would go to development of facilities and to help the football club out in various ways. So that is a nice little scheme that I devised. Well, I didn't devise, that we ran at the club last year, and that was during lockdown. And the good thing is that we went back 4 years with it. So it was a horrendous task, but we had a couple of young girls that helped with the administration. But in total we claimed nearly £37,000 back from HMRC, and that helped the football club immensely.
Well, that is a golden tip for sure. And Bob, any kind of key tips that you'd like to share?
Well, I'm not like Brian. I'm not into work. So my best tip is get your application in to become a CASC. Once HMRC receive that application and acknowledge it, from that point, you can claim gift aid. So then have your sponsored event, a pre-season sponsored event. Get your bouncy castles out, get your barbecues out, open your bar, let the kids walk round the pitch or 10 times and get as many sponsors as you can in. And once you've got all the money in, not only have you got £6,000 or £7,000 from the point of view of having the sponsor money and also your bar takings and a little bit of a fate income, but you've got probably somewhere in the region of £2,500 that you can claim gift aid, and it'll be a tester for you. And then the next year you can have more and more people on it. So keep it simple, start easy, and test the water.
And I think with football returning at the end of this month, and hopefully we'll be in a period where we can do them events at the beginning of next season and this summer, that it is going to be a good opportunity to test that, exactly like you said there, Bob. I think for those that are listening live, Brian is going to kindly drop in some links within the chat just around some funding opportunities that are out there right now that we want you all to be aware of. So Brian's going to do that for us. And I'm going to just bring in a couple more questions that we've received. I know that some have been answered within the chat, but I think it's relevant bringing them to the floor so other people can hear them. So one we've got here is, we're a single club with a junior section, and it has a separate bank account and a subscription system to that of the seniors. Would it be a problem in that instance there? Bob, are you able to respond, because you responded in the chat?
Yeah. Subscription, like I said right at the start, subscriptions are a bit of a minefield with HMRC. So you really want to make sure that you understand the rules, hence the easy start. But under no circumstances can subscriptions paid by an adult towards the use of a club be ever accountable to a donation with HMRC.
Thank you very much, Bob. And Chris Smith has asked, are CASC and FA Charter Standard constitutions interchangeable? So can one be used in place of the other, or would elements need to be taken from both to satisfy both awarding bodies? So the FA Charter Standard constitution that the majority of charter standard clubs adopt is taken from the Standard Code of Rules and the FA handbook. So the majority of that in there is reviewed year on year to be eligible for CASC. Obviously, it's a case of us all just double checking that, and I've got that on my to-do list as well for when we update the constitution for next season. So if there is any changes or amends that need to be made to help within this process, that's usually caught within that constitution and rules there, Chris, but it's worthwhile checking.
Tom, if I can come in, if people are struggling with the constitution bit and becoming a CACS, there's always the volunteer centre. Your local volunteer centre will help you through that, and it's free rather than going to one of your solicitors to do it. So that they will help with that process.
Brilliant.
It is worth, clubs just to, because every club is so unique and different, it really is worth just having a discussion sometimes and just saying, this is where we are. And we can sort of just look at that situation and say, what you can do compared to somebody else. It's so difficult sometimes to give general answers for everybody. And like, Bob had said, interpreting the rules from HMRC is sometimes difficult. And we've both gone to HMRC with a list of questions saying, your guidelines say this. And they will say, yes, they seem to say that, but we're not going to apply them like that. And so understanding how HMRC approach a situation isn't always that straightforward. And got the time we're writing letters on the club's behalf to say, this is how we interpret it. Do you agree? And once they sign that off, then we feel comfortable going ahead in that situation. But it's just a case of wording it in the best way for the club, given their situation. So it's not as straightforward as it should be.
The big thing to understand here is the government actually want to give you money. If they didn't want to give you money, then they wouldn't have invented the process of gift aid. So they do want to give it, but you have to stick to the rules, and that's like, keep it simple and you'll have no problems.
I think it's like anything starting out, isn't it? Once you've done it, that advice you give there, Bob, about dipping your toe in the water, having a starting point, going through the exercise, it'll almost become second nature, and then it'll just be a rolling process of making sure you're abiding and following the rules season on season.
It's a bit like a game of football, really. We all commit the occasional foul. It's so long as you don't get sent off.
And I think the beauty of what we're doing here, the great analogy, the beauty of what we're doing here, obviously, is that if there is any changes year on year, and if we continue to have people subscribe to In the Box and join us on these extra time webinars, if there is any changes, we can bring it to you first through these platforms, drawing on the expertise like the people we've got on this evening's webinar. So I'm just looking down at my notes to see what else, and I don't know about you, Charlotte, but I'll be certainly, even myself, having to listen back to this, because I was on the phone with Bob today. I'm involved in the club myself. We're just a one-team club. We're not a CASC, we're an unincorporated association. And I was quizzing Bob all about it, just saying, look, can we do it? Can't we do it? What's the pros? What's the cons? So, and I'm still getting my head around it. So don't feel ashamed if you're in exactly the same position. Like I say, this will be on a resource hub for everyone to be able to listen back to. So some of the key considerations I've got here, obviously, Robert, Bob, Brian, please add to these, is just identify the areas where you are eligible for gift aid. Go to HMRC, have a look at their guidance. Like you say, they want to give you the money, so the guidance is there. Although the different tools individually may not seem huge, when you put all them together, it's going to be significant for you and your club. And it's just about getting that commitment and involvement from those throughout the club. Don't go on this as a sole journey. Make sure the other committee members are there to support you.
Yeah, very much so. I endorse that, yeah.
Sorry, I was just going to say, there's been so much information. I feel like a sponge, and those are really, really key considerations. I'm just sitting there soaking in all the information.
Yeah, I was just going to come on to about the structures, and now's an ideal time because AGMs are coming up. Now's the ideal time to get it all in place, ready for your AGM, and you're ready to go next year.
And at the start of the year, get those declaration forms. When you register the new players, make sure everyone signs a declaration form.
Yeah.
So I can see, Brian, you've dropped them links in the chat around funding. So thanks ever so much for that. We've got a couple more questions that I'm going to bring in. So with regard to business rates, would becoming a CASC, the 80% relief, affect clubs that also receive the small business rates relief, which is 100%? Would clubs still receive the 100% small business relief in that case?
Are we talking the grant? I'm not quite sure what we're talking about. Are we talking what the business rate relief is that for the grant as well? I don't know.
I'm not actually sure myself. They might.
Okay. If I could just, my experience was that yes, we received the rate relief, 100% rate relief, and then we applied for the business rate grant. And Leicester City Council told me I wasn't entitled to it. I appealed that because it's on your rateable value, not on the rates you pay. I appealed it, and we've received the business rate grant since, and are still receiving it.
Okay, so if that's what that was in relation to, hopefully what Bob shared there clarifies that. Another, someone said, found this really interesting this evening. Could you ever claim gift aid on a summer five-a-side tournament? I guess it depends on how you register the teams that are entering the tournament. Is that correct?
I'd stick away from it. If there's any benefit at all, so if the players, if the club's playing on behalf of the players and they're getting a benefit of playing a game of football, you can't claim gift aid on it. It's interesting as well. One of the little things is can you claim gift aid on car park fees? Well, if you actually insist on somebody paying to park their car, no, you can't. If you have a bucket and ask for a donation, yes, you can.
Okay.
It helps if you have a gun.
I was going to say, that was a really, really golden tip there, Bob. But I mean, the first part of that advice, not so much the second. But there's a really, really great question that's coming, because we've spoken a lot about clubs, but of course, in the box is here for clubs and leagues. And CT has dropped in, I'm on a league committee. Are there any options for leagues to benefit from any of this? So I'll leave that down to you three to help us pick that apart.
That's one for Robert, I think.
So in terms of leagues, are they paying their players?
So the leagues won't be paying players, I would imagine, but they'd probably have perhaps clubs paying affiliation fees to be a part of that league.
Okay, well, that sounds like it should be okay then. It's as long as they're not paying their players, you know, as a CASC, you can't pay more than £10,000. They can pay expenses, and that's a different issue, but not pay their players directly. But there's scope for them to be claiming on gift aid. Yeah, we need to look at their situation again and just see how they are set up.
So what might help with that answer there, Robert, is that our leagues generally are run by volunteers. They'll have a committee, and they'll have teams that register with them and pay a registration fee. So there's no involvement in them directly to the players, because it's the clubs that run the teams with the players, but they pay a registration fee to the league to access their competition for the season.
Yeah. I mean, those things, again, it's what they're claiming gift aid on. And so, if you rent out a pitch and people are getting something for it, it depends on what they are claiming gift aid on. And so some of the elements, yes, they can claim gift aid, others they can't claim gift aid. It needs to be broken down.
Certainly Brian's example, where your volunteer committee are all attending matches, attending committee meetings, if they all put their expenses in and the league pay them, and then they donate the money back to the league as a donation, yes, they can claim gift aid on that.
Yeah.
Okay. And if I've got my understanding correct, and I probably haven't, because this has been a while, if a club and an individual team is paying a registration fee to a league, and that reduces down and they decide to pay a donation to the league, is the league able to claim gift aid on a donation from a club?
Yes, but as Brian has said as well, or Robert said, they'll go back and look at your subscriptions over the last 4 years. And in any case, the donation has to come from an individual, not an organisation.
Okay.
So
Brilliant.
if it comes from the club, no, you can't claim gift aid on it.
Okay. Well,
it's like saying I'm going to give, I'm not going to charge anyone for a cup of tea, but they can make a donation. But they're getting a cup of tea for it. And so I'll say they're getting something for their money. So in the true sense of it, you can't just call everything a donation, give everything away, call it a donation and claim gift aid on it. It wouldn't be, in theory, it wouldn't be allowed in that sense.
it's not ethical, is it really? So, yeah. Right. Absolutely fantastic. Blown away. Charlotte, I know you are. I can see your face. My head's exactly the same. So that's full time again for another episode of In the Box Extra Time.
Yeah, thank you, Robert, Brian, and Bob. Tom and I have learned a lot. I'm sure everyone tuned in has learned a lot as well. And for people tuned in live, I really would recommend go to YouTube, type in the FA's Resource Hub. There is so much amazing information. Previous episodes of In the Box in terms of the podcast, but In the Box Extra Time as well. And it was really great to explore what it is to be a CASC, the considerations for different organisations, and the role that gift aid plays as well. And we have spoken a lot about different links. We have spoken a lot about different resources. All of those will be highlighted in the show notes when this then goes on to the YouTube channel very, very shortly.
Yeah, so like I said, we'll recap on all the websites, all the links, put all the information out there. If you want to engage with us beyond here, you'll be able to find us on social media. Myself and Charlotte are very proactive on there. Please do email any questions into clubsprogram@thefa.com. That is your opportunity to ask us directly, and I'll work with the expertise like Robert, Brian and Bob to be able to give you the answers that you'll need and signpost you. There's, of course, future webinars coming up, so please do check out the hub of where you've booked onto this webinar, and be sure to continue to engage with us. Go like, go subscribe. Please do comment, because that'll help us continue to deliver this resource to help your clubs and leagues be the best you possibly can be.
Thanks so much, everyone. It's been great. And I suppose until next time, Tom, see you all again soon.
Yeah, and next time we'll all be back playing football within the grassroots landscape.